Back to the Parmjeet and Pradeep show. My name is Pradeep Sangha, and then we got Parmjeet Singh over here as well. Parmjeet, कितना?
ਬਸ ਠੀਕ ਆ ਪ੍ਰਦੀਪ ਕੀ ਹਾਲ ਚਾਲ ਆ
ठीक है, yeah. Good, good,
ਨਿਆਣੇ
good.
ਨਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਛੁੱਟੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ what are they up to?
No good. That's what they're up to. Kappa on there.
ਖੱਪ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ we were talking about this before we came live that ਨਿਆਣੇ ਨਾਨਕਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਗਏ ਹੋਏ ਆ
Hanji, yeah. They're gone to my mother-in-law's, which is good. She gets to take care of them and fatten them up for the next couple of weeks.
yeah ਨਾਨਕੇ they are notorious for spoiling kids.
Oh yeah, yeah. Makalo Tegayasita, I looked at them. I'm like, in 3 days, look how much weight they gained already. Their faces are like full, right? They're just
yeah actually ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਗਰਮੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਛੁੱਟੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਸੀ ਆਮ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ 1.5-2 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ ਜੂਨ ਜੁਲਾਈ ਅਗਸਤ ਤੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਨਾਨਕਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਮਾਮਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਜਾਂ ਭੂਆ ਦੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਸੋ usually it would end up in ਕਿ ਨਾਨਕਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਚਲੇ ਗਏ and then ਮਾਸੀ ਵੀ ਹੋਊਗੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਮਾਮਾ ਜੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਸੀਗੇ ਜਰਮਨੀ 'ਚ ਪਰ ਵੱਡੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਸੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਸੋ we used to have fun that's our favorite place and then ਭੂਆ ਜੀ ਕੋਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਚਲੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਫਿਰ ਰੱਖੜੀਆਂ ਬੰਨ੍ਹਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ there was something very interesting before this Rakhdi system became very commercialized, I remember my Puaji would buy wool and they will make their own Rakhdi. So it was customized, tailor-made Rakhris for everyone. Means the design for me would be different than my dad and my Tayaji and my Chachaji. And for me it will be different, for my brother it will be different, for my sister it will be different. So I often wonder how much effort there was, how much love and affection there was when they were doing all these kind of things.
There must
now
have
we
been a lot.
now we
Must have been
just
a lot of affection.
yeah I mean now people go and you pick up 5 pieces of rakhdis and just different colors and shapes that has been customized for you. You pay for it and you just do the festival. So those are kind of fond memories in the context. But I think it's a part of a habit that I still want to go back to my nanake every summer.
Yeah, well, Nanake are supposed to be fun. They're the fun ones. The Dalek are a little bit different, right? They're the ones that are a little bit more disciplined, and keep the kids in line. I think that's one of my biggest challenges when I go there. Every time I go to my mother-in-law's, I see chips there. I see cookies everywhere, popsicles, pop. There's no discipline. So when we talk about today's topic, the power of habits, that's one of my frustrations when I go there. It seems like all their habits and their discipline goes out the window.
Exactly. Means I nanake and discipline, they are a kind of a odd combo. Though I would say that mere mama ji jade vadde sige, he was very disciplined. But even one person who is disciplined can be pretty easily taken over by 5 who are not disciplined. So Nana ji, Nani ji, and all other people were they are just out to pamper you, and I think that's a beautiful part in way. Of course, it has its own side effects.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today: the power of habits and how it impacts your life. And Parmjit, you were talking about a lecture that you just did around habits, right?
Yes, but today in the morning we had this is part of our course, which is called Praxis. So it's a second year course, and we were delivering a lecture on identifying habits, how to identify habits and how to monitor your habits, how do you change it. But we do talk about habit from a perspective of where the habit comes from. So we talk about lineage, what is your self knowledge, where it comes from, how it is placed in kind of a culture, religion, your social life, your parenting, your socioeconomic status, all those kind of things. And that usually self knowledge create a kind of story we live in. So each one of us has a kind of a story. We tell those stories sometimes through words, sometimes through actions, sometimes through behaviors, sometimes the way we walk, the way we talk, we tell those stories. So stories then generate habits, because it's a kind of a loop that continues. And then when it comes to habit, it becomes very tricky, because we often tend to think as humans that we make decisions every day. That,
Mhm.
but interesting part of human decision making is that we are largely away from that impression. Means in the late 2000s, two Duke researchers published a research which suggested that in any living moment, daylight, 45% of our decisions are driven by habits.
Mhm.
They are not driven by very conscious decision making.
Yep.
So that is almost like a flip of coin. I mean, 45% of the time, uh, your is consumed by something that's a habitual. So if something is habitual, it means you are not very conscious about it, and if you are not conscious about it, you most likely are continue to be on the path which can put you at a risk of bad habits.
Mhm.
So as long as that 45% is allocated to somebody or something which is habitual, something which is healthy, that's okay. But we know that habit is not only good, but we also have a lot of unwholesome habits.
Yeah, I think that's where, I always say to the gentleman that I work with, show me your day timer if you actually have a day timer, and I'll tell you basically the success that you'll have in life, or the level of success that you're at right now. Because habits say a lot. If you work out, if you meditate, you go for walks, you eat healthy, you have proper habits, you're more likely to have that life that you want. Because it's not, a lot of people think that goal setting is the way to success. It is very important because it creates drive, it creates motivation at the beginning, but it's the habits along the way that you create as a result of the goals that you want that actually lead to the results, that lead to the end goal. And all of us have good habits and some not so good habits. And I always say, what, habits are okay. I don't say good or bad. I like to say whether they're empowering or disempowering in relationship to your goals.
Or wholesome, if I may add to your thought, means whether its habit is wholesome or unwholesome,
Hmm.
whether it moves you into the direction of whatever you want. And habit to me is also, if I can add to your thought, is an investment.
Hmm.
Every day we make a kind of a repeating investment, especially if it becomes a kind of a habit which is we do it every day. And
Hmm.
habit can be something simple like picking up your coffee from Tim Horton or any franchise whatsoever, and rather than making at home. So
Hmm.
you're making an investment in something, um, or any other small thing. In fact, small habits are more consequential in the long term than big habits, because big habits oftenly we become aware because the cost of big habits are oftenly huge. We cannot escape it, but the cost of small habits are so subtle. It's like a drip 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 thing, that it has to become wet enough for us to actually notice that something odd has happened.
Hmm.
Means even like picking up a coffee or something from your local franchise, if you add all the things that goes into the effort of going into, um, investing money into it, and it actually turns out to be huge. Means I notice a lot of people would wake up in the morning and they will go to a local franchise to get the coffee. And sometime when I'm in a kind of an odd mood, I will ask them, you could have actually made your own coffee. You don't have to drag yourself in pajamas to the local franchise. Though I don't want to judge it, because it could be that they like the coffee, that the taste
Hmm.
and flavor of it. But I also know that a lot of people do it out of habit.
Yeah, it becomes a habit. Yeah.
And and when it becomes habit, then if it is a daily habit, then it's a daily investment. It
Hmm.
grew in trust over the period of time. It becomes part of our life.
Yeah, I think you're right because what ends up happening is it is a smaller habit. So it's not just the money maybe people are spending on the coffee, but it's also the caffeine. And then some people say that they can't sleep properly, but they're drinking 3 or 4 coffees a day. And it's really easy. And what I see too is when people have habits and they realize that they have habits that are maybe not empowering, is the way I put it, or disempowering in terms of their goals, what ends up happening is if they try to take that habit away with actually filling that habit in with something positive, they'll find another disempowering habit of some sort. So people will stop drinking alcohol, but maybe they'll start taking up something else, right? Um, so it's important to know that every time that someone gets rid of a habit, thinking that it's gone, make sure that you replace it with something else as well, because I think there's this conception that we can stop. Going back to your point, I think ultimately this is what I'm saying here is that we are we are on autopilot a lot of our days, and that's not something that I think we can get rid of overnight. And in fact, I don't know if we can't get rid of it completely at all, because it takes up way too many resources to be conscious all the time. If we were consciously thinking about every single decision, we wouldn't be able to do anything. We wouldn't be able to walk properly. We wouldn't be able to open the door. We wouldn't be able to go for the walk, because we're just consuming so much mental energy. So, I know I'm kind of beating around the bush here, but I think the reality is that we're always going to be on autopilot a certain period or percentage of our day. I think that's just how we're built. I think there's the ability to be more conscious as well, but I'm skeptical in terms of how much more conscious we can actually be. And Parnjit, are there any studies in terms of how, because you're in the space of mindfulness, which is about being aware, right? Focusing your attention, being intentional. Are there studies that have been done around, okay, if we're at 45 or even 47%, for example, well, from what I heard in terms of latest research, have people been able to shift that down to maybe 25% or 20%?
I'm not very sure that I know of any studies which actually specifically answer that question, but I know of other studies which, for example, if somebody has a habit of smoking, say for example, and they are in the habit of smoking and have been for a long period of time, if you put them into the standard operating procedure of smoking cessation program, which is standardized program, uh, and you put another cohort in a mindfulness based smoking cessation program, it looks like that the relapse rate in the latter group, the mindfulness group, is a lot less. um, it cuts down by, if I'm not incorrect, around 35% or 65%. It's actually quite
Wow,
noticeable, significant.
that's
So
significant.
forgive my clear knowledge here, but it's actually quite noticeable. um, because when people go through the process of leaving that smoking habit, mindfulness based programs often tell them to not try to break the habit, but instead become aware of the habit and
Hmm.
be. So rather than, means they will tell you to smoke, that's actually the oddest way to break a habit. Because if somebody is there with you and you want them to have their smoking habits broken, mindfulness based system would allows you that, okay, you have to approach your smoking as a conscious activity. When you whip up the cigarette, you wake up with the lighter, you smell the cigarette, you smell the taste, you do all the things just very consciously. And interestingly, the whole organic experience of smoking, um, it in fact paves the way for breaking the habit. um,
Hmm.
so, and because what happens, and another thing we need to keep in mind, that and this adds to what you were saying earlier, that habit serves a purpose. Either habits serve a long term hole that has been left in our life, or whatever spiritual or religious uh, purposes, or habit is a distraction.
Hmm.
Because you will even notice, and this is my observation, I could be wrong here, that people who smoke, for example, they also at the same time will have a coffee. And I would wonder, why would you do two things? If smoke is so enjoyable, why would you add another variable to that? And if coffee is enjoyable, why would you actually do that? And pairing that, I think they work together. They will tell you that the cues are, they pair together. So it means both of them serve as a purpose, and maybe one is distracting from another one. Yeah. So there's a this the conscious aspect of the habit. The moment it become intentional, our relationship with the habit changes.
Hmm.
And as I said before, that significant amount of our daytime is often run by automatic processes, automatic habits. Uh, but if we make it conscious, then it becomes a very different ball game.
Yeah, be conscious of your habits. I think that's ultimately the main point there. And if you have more habits that align with your goals and what you want to do in life or what you want to have, and less of the ones that hold you back, you're going to be in pretty good shape, I think, in the longer term. Now, let's talk about discipline, Parmji, because I think discipline is something that's really important. It is something that my grandfather, even my dad and my mom taught me, having very strong discipline. My grandfather was in the Indian Army for 30 something years. He was a subadar, right? And he was the most disciplined man I know, and actually one of the most intelligent men that I knew. He spoke English, he spoke Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu, even French as well, because at that time the British were leading the army, and he had a lot of knowledge about the world, but also teachings as well. And I remember him telling me and teaching me about discipline and the root of discipline, and even the term yoga and how it stems from the Sanskrit term of discipline. And the principle behind it of being disciplined is true freedom. Because when you're disciplined with the things that you should be disciplined with, you create the freedom of being able to do the things that you want in life. Whereas a lot of people who are not disciplined end up forced to be disciplined against their will in some way, shape, or form. And I'll use a prime example. There's people who eat healthy and exercise, and they get to do it on their terms, because you can eat, maybe have a cheat day here or there, but on average, you're eating healthy and you're maintaining a routine. And you can continue that throughout your entire life, hopefully, if you don't have any other conditions. And then you have people who have a heart attack and know now that their arteries are blocked and they are forced to eat healthy. Now they have no option. Now, even eating a piece of cake could be detrimental for them. So I think it's important to realize that when we are disciplined, maybe at an earlier stage, I think overall at the end of the day, it gives us the freedom to have more freedom in life, if that makes sense at all.
No, no, exactly. I think having a discipline uh, trumps the habit, because and also the idea of motivation, because sometimes we're always looking for that the moment of the flashlight of motivation coming, where we can actually lace up our shoes and hit the gym, or do some groundbreaking work we have been dreaming to do. But we also realize realistically that moment never arrives most of the time. um, Usually our life is co-opted by daily habits. And then if you think about discipline is like minimalizing your life. It's just creating is keeping only certain variables, not being open to everything. So one of the things we talked about in the previous things, that we are negative, that rather than, if you want to get out of your life, try to subtract things away rather than add things, unless those additions are necessary requirement for whatever you need to do. But sometime having things subtract, minus out or delete out of your life is a much way better to be disciplined, and to beat the power of habit and to construct or constitute a new habit, and also get over this motivational lack we often are hit by day to day. There are many times, for whatever good reason or bad reason, we don't feel motivated. But if you are disciplined, you will notice that you will
Mhm.
find the way. Means there's many time in my own practice of meditation, I don't want to wake up and do it. But once you get into the habit of sitting, then regardless of whether you're groggy or not, you end up sitting. And precisely because of that, habit takes time. Means we often think that you have to, the old folklorish, that it takes 40 days to change a habit, but that's actually not, that's unsupported folklore.
Mhm.
Habit can take, means one of the studies which appeared many years was that a habit change can happen from anywhere from few weeks to almost like a 254 days, something like that. And it depends on the complexity of the habit. If you want to wake up and just drink a glass of water, that doesn't require much effort. You can form that habit maybe within a week. But if you are trying to change old habit patterns, that is going to take some time, months on end. And sometimes when we believe or buy into this kind of folklore of the 40 days, people just throw their hands in the air and says, oh well, it's not going to change. So having a discipline in meditation word, they would say that if you are actually meditate for a year consistently, then you are set for life, because now you have formed a very basic habit,
Mm.
because it's a complex skill.
Yep.
It's a skill which requires you to pay attention, work with the discomfort, and get over what it means to meditate it from a pop culturist way.
Yeah, and I think how you structure your habits is important too, because you can, I'm not going to say cheat the system, but even how you structure your habits has an impact in terms of how long it takes to create a habit. For example, if you're trying to go and to the gym after working, after an entire days of work, most people, from my experience, I used to be a personal trainer when I was younger, will not do it because they don't have enough energy to go there. There's a ton of excuses. But if you do it before, you're more likely to keep that habit, right? You have more energy at that time. You have less excuses, right? Because as soon as you get home, and I've heard this over and over again, once people get home from work, they don't feel like getting up again and going to the gym. So you can structure your habits effectively so you're more likely to actually do them and more likely to actually structure them as well. So I think that's important to pay attention to. And you have to find what works for you. I think that's the other thing, Parmjit, is habits are personalized. So what works for one person may not work for someone else. There's guys I know out there that love working out in the evening. That is where when they feel most energized. I can't do that because I know evening is my time to relax and spend with my family. I'm more energized in the morning. So I think when we take a look at this, and I think this is one of the flaws of habits, because there's the book out there called The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. It's a very popular one. And I'm not saying anything bad about it because I think it's very well put together. I think the information in there and the routine of getting up early and doing things early, I think is important. I get up early myself at 5:30 sometimes, and I follow a specific routine. But I've seen a lot of people fail after reading the 5 a.m. Club, thinking that they need to get up at 5 o'clock and meditate and do all these kinds of things. And it's just not for them. They just don't get the satisfaction out of it. They just don't get the results that they're looking for. So doing that based on your own life and personalizing habits, whatever they are, and incorporating them in terms of your lifestyle, I think is important.
Exactly. I think it reminds me of that, again, the quote of Henry David Thoreau of many men go fishing for all their lives without knowing that it is the fish they are after. So I think we need to know what kind of fish we are after. If and the fish here is a metaphor for habit, where it is coming from. So if you read that Robin Sharma's book 5 a.m. Club and you want to be Robin Sharma, that is not going to play. But if
Mm.
you are built to get up at 5 a.m. and your circadian rhythm, for example, is okay with 5 a.m. waking up, you might actually be very comfortable like getting into it. So the first thing of habit change is that uh, at least know what you need to change and be honest and comfortable with the limitation. For example, personally, I when I was back in India, when I was in 10th, 11th, 12th, before I get into the hostels, it was easier for her to wake up at 5 o'clock because we are farmers family. My father will drag us up at 5 o'clock. ਅਸੀਂ ਕਣਕ ਵੱਢੀ ਝੋਨਾ ਲਾਇਆ ਉਹ ਤੜਕੇ ਤੜਕੇ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਸਾਰਾ ਮਿਲ ਕੇ
Mm.
ਤੇ you will the in summer the school will start at 7:30, so our father will drag us uh, to harvest or cut the wheat between like 5:30 and 6 or 7 or 6 o'clock, and then we'll come back, take shower and go to school. It was easier because we were part of it. But then as I have actually transitioned through various continents, it's difficult for me to wake up at 5 o'clock. It becomes even difficult when you have kids because you have other
Mhm.
responsibilities. So also we have to consider those kind of complications. Alone, if you're alone, it will be easier to actually shift these things. If you're married, it becomes difficult. If you have kids, it become extra difficult. If you have parents to take care, business to run, all those variables will actually add a kind of added difficult to do that. So coming back to having that kind of self knowledge, what kind of fish you are trying to catch, and is it really the fish? Means if you're running the show, are you running the show because it makes you kind of a uncomfortable, or what is the discomfort, what are you trying to change. So asking those kind of exploratory questions is a good way to start, in addition to setting up the logistics of, so that we are not changing what we don't need, or we are not just running on the spot for a long period of time.
Yeah, very great points there. So I think this is a great time to close it out because we've talked about habits a lot. I think there's some interesting topics that we can talk about coming out of this conversation today, Parmjeet. So do you have any last words for the audience?
I would suggest start small and be consistent. Don't try to reach the moon in one day. Focus long term. Even if you spend 5 minutes on something, over the months it will add up, and it will automatically form a habit. If you exercise for 5 minutes, it will be easier to exercise 10 minutes in 2 months. If you meditate for 5 minutes, it will be easier for you to sit for 10 minutes in few months. So start small, don't be very ambitious, have a very clear goal, but be very consistent. Consistency beats the lack of motivation, and then helps us form the habit. And once the habit become formed, it become automatized, then you don't have to do much about it.
Very well said. So you've heard Parmjeet about habits. Take his advice because you'll be better off as a result for sure. So thank you for tuning in. Wish you the very best. We appreciate all your support. If you like this episode, please share it with your network. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pradeep.